This is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative take about the world around me. So, in this episode, I am going to talk about the impact of Stephen King and then go into depth about my thoughts on, particularly with one adaptation, the breakdown of adaptation, that is. So I'm going to give some facts about Secret Window towards the end of, facts of did you know, that sort of aspect towards the end of this episode. But mainly I'm going to focus on the difference and the aspect of how things change when you adapt books to movies. All right, so let's get into this. Okay, so as I mentioned in Beetlejuice, the Beetlejuice episode, when I was saying about critics, so it's one thing for people purposely, as I was pointing out, saying something is bad when it really has a lot of merit. It really has a lot of depth and understanding. And, not giving credit to that, just, crapping on something for no reason out of either economic interest or to trend to do so. But it's another thing with looking at something, with constructive criticism, which is a very good thing. And I said this in an earlier episode with the importance of constructive criticism. It gives if you're willing to have the discipline to hear it and have the humbleness to accept it, it can really help you develop in your work, your life, and so on. So, that's needed. So, all right, so with this said, now I'm going to go in. I'm just saying this as a means to give a really good example, I think, personally from my point of view, as I happen to be a woman who's black, right? And so, more interestingly enough, Tyler Perry's latest movie is supposed to be a prime example of the essence of black culture, when in reality it's just another stereotype that feeds into something that shouldn't be tapped into. So, I mean, the Voice in Black and all the latest criticisms about this is something that's been long overdue from my personal point of view. So don't look, I'm looking at it like this, and then all of you, I would like to know your comments about it. So I think it's way more impactful when people are saying, hey, we want to see something different as far as the point of view about the black experience, right? And when you want to just keep pushing these stereotypes, is it really in your best interest? Do you really care about, the different aspects of people who are black or the American experience? What's really going on with that? And, they say about the critics of this movie saying, hire writers who have different experiences and all that. On top of that, also don't discredit, which is unfortunate because particularly 9 times out of 10, the way it goes with mainstream media is really a liberal bent perspective. And, conservative perspectives outside of that gets deemed as unsavory. So, also have that aspect into the representation, of the Black experience, because that is a credible thing. That is a noble thing to introduce into, and it's just unfortunate that's something that's overlooked too, as far as the, on top of this. So, okay, moving on. Let's get into Stephen King. So, Stephen King, as I mentioned a lot of times before in different episodes, it's just unfortunate that he bent to the knee with a woke agenda that, hey, I got to be on this bandwagon of these liberated thoughts, which is the term liberal is not what it is originally and the true intention of a liberal, But needless to say with that. And so, it wipes away from his resume of very in-depth analysis about the human condition in his work, his body of work. So, all right, getting into adaptations, particularly the most noticeable, and it, just went on the, I guess, the tier after that is The Shining. So the book is really impactful, particularly, I don't want to give so much away, for those who haven't read the book, but, particularly Danny in his relationship with his father, and then when the Dr. Sleep, how that just completely wiped away the redeeming character of his father, and that's all missed when whatever agenda they were trying to push in the installment or the adaptation of Dr. Sleep. So in The Shining, it's quite interesting because Kubrick, he had the representation of it's my way or the highway kind of mentality when it goes to directing movies. And, it was quite interesting how Stephen King had to fight and say, no, this isn't the way. And it still went lost in translation, so to speak, with the pun intended with the movie, of how the vision of what should go on and the adaptation of the movie, how it just went left field. And it's very unfortunate because you miss the reality of the emotional impact and the emotional arc of these people and these characters in these books. So, and then it's one thing to have a, open mind and say, well, you got to separate the book from the film. But it's another thing when writers, directors, overtly, they just say, we do not care to take the time to understand the original work. We just have our own merit, from what they deem as their own merits, and we want to present it the way that we want to. But that's very interesting, which I also discussed this with my husband about his thoughts on this. So if that's true, why don't you just make something of your own instead of relying on other people's work? And so it went even further in depth, and particularly, I think the most, the one that even was, as far as, the impact of the female experience in an ever-changing world, and a really strong character, female character, if that is, and the realm of Stephen King, is Dolores Claiborne. And it's quite interesting because in the book, the way everything is written, depicted from the point of view of the mom and the daughter, it's completely different. And it gives more of a light on the broken relationship and how it can resurface itself through tragedy, and how those things are explained and are presented in this book, and how the sad reality of abuse, domestic violence, how that shapes a family and how that shapes a person. And that's just totally sorry about that, my children. Hey, y'all, keep it down now. Be good, okay? So, how that's just hit and a miss in the movie, because it just seems like it is just pushing this feminist bent of, the self-brooding, the self-loathing sort of, and then with a little bit of arrested development in the daughter, and the sensationalism of, in the movie, if you haven't seen it, it's a little bit of a spoiler, sleeping with the boss, and the notion of this comes through the background that she was raised in, and there's a whole lot of potholes that doesn't really make sense to make it. That it's not acceptable to have that type of relationship anyway. But why is that? It was very strange, just needless to say, right? So it's very interesting how things fall short when most of the time when you adapt the stuff from books to movies. And now, all right, my even further discussion into this. So it's quite clear that in today's society, as far as movies, television shows, and so on, that this is a revolving presence of how the lack of analysis, the lack of depth and research, the lack of original thought is really failing the aspects of what could be a very pivotal thing in our society as far as literature, particularly with cinema and on to television, because we can all agree that what we value as of entertainment, what we value, as in the arts and the literature and so on, that shapes society. And then when those things are not preserved as of something to take serious, that opens the door for the breakdown and destruction of society. And I think that's something that has to be remembered. And then it's very unfortunate, particularly when you get into Star Wars and the original aspect of Star Wars, how this is all about the importance of good versus evil and triumphing over that. And then when you get into now the aspect of, hold on, okay, baby, hold on. Sorry about that, my baby's thirsty. Okay, here you go, sweetie. Okay, let mama finish and I'll get back to you. So, you get into this feminist bent again with, there's no internal struggle with the character. It's just, particularly how it started out with Ray, and then going on to what you see now showcased in the movies and in the television shows. How, there's no there's no arc of struggle in anything. It's just this ever-present example, time and time again, of pushing the agenda of this, as corny as it is, but that was, pretty impactful for its day. But I'm saying it as how it's just lost now with what the intentions was with that song. I am woman, hear me roar. You see this, and it's just really unfortunate. So I would like to know what you all think about this, as far as the aspect of adaptation in films and adaptations from literature, as far as literature, adaptations from comic books, or adaptations from television series that were and then readapted into modern society, adaptations of particularly something that is based on true events, loosely translated with that. And then also, I just like to hear your thoughts about that. So you can either reach me through email, Substack, or X. Be greatly appreciated. All right, so I'm moving on to the last segment to talk about the secret window and the origin of it and everything in the aspects of that. All right, so this is the ins and outs of how the secret window came to be. And of course, this source will be provided for you in this episode. So when Stephen King was in Colorado during the filming of the 1997 miniseries version of The Shining, he was inspired to pursue something that he had never tried before, adapting someone else's work. During his downtime on the shoot, he watched the Danish series The Kingdom, made by filmmaker Lars von Trier. And he was so affected by the material that he decided he wanted to develop an English language version. The problem he immediately faced was getting a hold of the rights. As he describes in the interview with Tony Mascarell for the, forgive me on the pronunciation of that, for the book Hollywood Stephen King, The Kingdom, was owned by Columbia Pictures, and the studio was in the process of trying to turn it into a feature film, thus not willing to sell. Fortunately for King, screenwriters had a devil of a time squeezing the content of the 8-episode original into 2-hour packs. After developing a number of unworkable drafts, the studio was in a position to negotiate with the author. So, As of this, a trade was made. Stephen King got the rights to the Kingdom, which he remade as 2004's Kingdom Hospital. Columbia Pictures required Secret Window, Secret Garden, one of the 4 novellas from the 1990 collection of 4 Past Midnight. So this was said in the interview by King. And so this is another quote by him. It says, "My novella is the right length. It's small, but it's in one place. Columbia now has the chance to make a great feature." Okay, so Anthony Minghella, the director of The Talented Miss Ripley and The English Patient, was briefly attached to the helm of the Stephen King adaptation, but ultimately the job went to David Cope, who was coming off the success of writing the screenplay for Sam Raimi's Spider-Man, which Columbia Pictures produced, with Secret Window being largely associated with the novel by Frances Hodgins Burnett. That half of the title was axed, and Secret Window, starring Johnny Depp, went into production in the summer of 2003, splitting time between Quebec, Canada, and New York. Released in March of 2004, the film has a mixed legacy, arriving less than a year after Gore Verbinski's Pirates of the Caribbean, The Curse of the Black Pearl. Johnny Depp's star power was skyrocketing, but critics on the whole didn't respond to the trope-heavy thriller. So Secret Window, well, it had some style, but an argument was made that it was doomed from the start. And that's what is really the core of the adapting of Stephen King with this. And I find it's quite interesting in this article that is an addressed issue, because for whatever reason, Stephen King novels have a hard time getting the right kind of detail of attention and the true to life explanation of what the characters experience and what they think and how they feel. It's not translated properly a lot of times, most of the times really, in the films, almost all of the time really. And it's one of those things where I look into the questioning of, is it because it's too realistic? For instance, the aspect of race relations, and it's told honestly, but also at the same time, it's not a victimized depiction about race relation, as far as things that happen with the main character and his father and what he experienced out of race relations. He tried to come up out of that. Hush, honey. Come up out of that and make a business for himself. And, he didn't, he just saw himself as a person that's not a circumstance of his race, that, he's a person, and then, keeps driving on. And so maybe it's one of those things, I'm not sure. Just, for me, it's one of those things that to keep in mind. So Secret Window has some style to it, but an argument can be made, as I said, about the adaptation. So, being perhaps the most dedicated professional writers, Stephen King, as it is themed in this article, as dedicated writer, and I, will give credit where credit is due. Yes, his work is very detailed in nature and very written well. And it seems to have the endless thoughts on the work and the process, and he regularly channels his musings through the stories he tells and the characters he creates. Secret Window, Secret Garden exemplifies this tendency, and King sees it as a kind of middle child between two of his other works, as this is linked to misery. What he's referring to is Misery and the Dark Half. So in the preface before Secret Window, Secret Garden, The Four Past Midnight, Stephen King explains that the origins of the novella can be traced back to when he was writing The Dark Half. So, which was a book he wrote particularly in the response to his alter ego, Richard Bachman. So Richard Bachman with the Running Man, things like that, the books like that, for one example. And so, in the novel, the protagonist, author Thad Bowman, comes face to face with George Stark, a supernatural physical manifestation of his bloodthirsty pseudonym. It's King exploring the powerful whole fiction which can be achieved over the writer, which mirrors how Misery is about the influence that fiction can have on the reader. So that's quite interesting with the aspect of the honing in on this about power, the power of fiction over the writer, how the daunting tales of creating characters, creating depth in the characters that has appeal to an audience. And then, being honest with that, of what happens is a real reality, or what happens in the aftermath of that, creating, a culture, creating a base with your work. Cut that out, okay?
What pipe?
She's in her room.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, guys. So, Secret Window, Secret Garden is Stephen King's attempt at executing both ideas simultaneously in the same narrative is executed through the conflict between novelist Morton Rainey and a mysterious stranger named John Shooter, who accused Morton of stealing one of his stories. And so to wrap everything up, when I saw this movie initially, I thought it was quite interesting. So, I was looking at it from the point of view as if it was, how campy it was, as if it was the writer depicting his sense of reality of the way he sees things. And then, I thought that was just the playing in on his unstable psyche. And it's quite interesting on how everything breaks down to explaining, when you go back to explain how these things came to be, as far as depicting things from the written version into the adaptation. And then it's also, as I mentioned before, one of those things is very, I think it takes a lot of, it just takes a lot of, it gives a lot of respect to the source if you take the time to, correctly adapt something from what its original intention. And then, with also find a space to make things your own. But when you make things your own, crafting that and understanding it from your point of view, still give respect to what the original source came from. And I think it would make the movie, television, etc. much better. Just a cup of thought, or penny for thought. So this reaches the end of the Harboring Light. As I mentioned, feedback is greatly important. So, reach out to me. Either X, and that link will be provided. Either comments through YouTube, which I'm building up episodes on there, releasing that, and then getting a rapport with that. Your comments, leaving comments on YouTube or Substack would be greatly appreciated. Tune in, turn up, and absolutely take care. Bye-bye now.